Hi guys, welcome to the Studio 134 podcast. I'm Alec, this is Gabe, and today we are talking about the different series we've been doing and how we've been kind of working to tie them all into each other, and how we are tying that into the next series that we have coming up. So, the first series we did this year was about faith over fear.
Such a good one too.
It really
So
was.
good.
What were some of your big takeaways from that?
Faith over fear has always been a thing that's kind of just like stuck out to me in my own life too. It's just like how often do I have to make the choice between like I'm just gonna leap or I'm going to allow the thought of what it's like to leap bother me all the way up to that point. And so like, man, when I think about it that way, it simplifies it down to like, then why am I not leaping? Like, why wouldn't I just go for it, you know? And like, just the amount of things that he was able to bring out, and the things Apple would talk about in a lot of the talks to just like directly speak to, just like, choose faith, just do it, just go for it. And honestly, like the part, I know that there was a part too where he talked about it just being like, kind of like the radical choice to just like jump off and just go for it. And the irony is like, I mean, we have skateboards, we do all of the like kind of extreme sports, all of the like fun things to do around here anyways. And just to watch people just go and they would jump into or drop into a quarter pipe or a half pipe, no problem. It was like, all right, well, what does it look like to do that same thing in other areas of your life? Like it's such an applicable trait. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that series was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, it was good.
It really was. And yeah, like I think for me too, I kind of took away like, it's so easy to be fearful and let that get in the way of our faith and like how we're actually following Jesus sometimes. Like it's hard it's easy to let our fear get in our way of obedience almost. So
yeah, no, it's so true. So true.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'd like to believe that like I've gotten to the point where like I don't fear things anymore. We've taken a few like leaps and we're good to go. But like I just don't feel like that's the way God does it in our lives. Like he gives us these moments and opportunities like these, as if faith could be like quantified as a brick of just like he'll just give us these opportunities to be able to jump off. And it's like when we do it, he gives us this like brick to just like lay on a wall as we continue to do it. And the cool part in that being like he's building a foundation for us to jump further and for us to be more faithful and to be able to jump into things like, because he's ultimately the one that gives us the faith that we have to be able to jump in the first place, right? And so I just love that he'll start where we're at and then allow us to build from there and be like, are you cool with going further? Because like we can go further than this. Like there's some really amazing things I have for your life, like just who he is. He's a good God.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah, and then from faith over fear, we went into our What Is Love series. So we were talking about what does love actually look like? What is love designed to look like? What is like God's design for love rather than like our flawed version of humanity love? Like what did you take away from that?
I feel like as all of these have gone through, so like faith to fear and then like what is love, it's almost like you have to take the step first to be able to step into who Jesus is. But as you get to know Jesus, you start to realize like he doesn't just exude love, he is love. And like what is love? Like it's like getting to finally jump into like this is who he is. Like come and be part of like what Jesus does. Like the thing that you desire so desperately in all areas of your life, he is that. And and he's gonna be with you in all of those things as you move forward. So like I just love that you can describe love a million different ways and in any way that kind of makes sense on this earth. And the irony being like, but truthfully, like what we're really talking about in those moments is God, which is so cool. Like, so no, it was good. So it was like you take the leap of faith, you find Jesus, then like this is what it looks like to be with him. He is love. This is where it is. And then what was the series after this one too? Because I feel like they're almost like one after another into something that's just like this is what it is to like be a follower of who Jesus is, right?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what the next one was.
Okay,
it was all about following Jesus. So
that's
which is kind of the intent. Like we were hoping they would all kind of tie into each other, almost like one big series.
Love that.
Yeah,
it's true. And it's just cool that like he's so applicable to all of those different processes within it, where it's like, I feel like when you look at like the big picture of jumping into like a relationship with anybody, there's just always so many question marks. And so to be able to break it down into like, it's a lot simpler than than it seems, but it's also one of the greatest relationships that you're going to ever have. Like, take the steps, go one at a time, like, and don't feel like you have to rush into it. Just take the calling that you feel like is coming to you in these moments that God's working on in your heart, and then leap into those things. And like, he's faithful. He always shows up in those things. So
Exactly.
he'll just take you down that pathway as you need it. So
Exactly. I love that. And that's such a great summary of like all three of these things. And then kind of the next series we're going into, it's called Seeking Shelter. So it's about essentially why are our main two ministries the Refuge and Higher Grounds? Like, why do we call them that? So like the Refuge literally comes from the word refuge, which is a safe place. Like, we want that to be a safe place for everyone who comes. Like, we want that to be a welcoming place, a place where you feel loved, where especially if maybe you don't feel like you fit in school or at home or wherever in your social circles, like we want you to find refuge there. We want you to find a safe place there where you do fit in, where you are family. That's kind of the whole intent behind the name of that.
And with transparency, because the reality is like you're straight up saying like, there's nothing hidden here. We want you to have the ability to have a safe place to come and do these types of things. And I'm not really afraid to tell you that, like, oh, well, they've got like backwards intention. No, this is the intention. Like, the intention is to give you a space, because not everybody has that. I know when I was growing up, I didn't have a place like the Refuge or Higher Grounds at all that like was anywhere nearby. So I wouldn't have heard about it, wouldn't have had any. So what did I have to do? I had to create that space myself, or find it in something else that wasn't, that didn't maybe have like the same level of safety. For me, it was like being in metal bands for the longest time. Like, that was where I found my identity all through like high school and college, was like in that type of like scene. And I feel like we all do this, right? Like, sometimes it's in cliques, sometimes it's in something, but we're always like seeking this like identity piece. And I love that like what the Refuge and Higher Grounds brings is like what if the identity piece is like, that's cool that you have it, and we're open to all different versions of what that looks like, but what if you realize that the identity piece is actually like not the most important piece to you being able to like step into a place of safety and doing everything else? Like, that there is identity, and we believe that's in Christ, but we don't have to force that on you, because that's not a thing that's going to need to be forced. Like, you're going to see love here, and that's a good thing. Like, that's the positive of everything that's being brought here, and a place where you can explore what your identity actually is, rather than feeling like you have to be a certain thing.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I love that. And that's pretty similar to like why Higher Grounds is called Higher Grounds. Like, the idea there is like, if you're in a storm, especially like a flood, like you got to get to higher ground to seek safety. Like, we want this also to be a safe place, a place where you can fit in, whether you fit in other places or not. Like, we don't care. Right. You're welcome here. Like, that's the whole point.
Totally. It's awesome. So, it's really, really good.
Yeah. And it's just so cool what this place is for people, and I think it's so cool that we get to be a part of that.
Oh, it is. Like I said, I wish that like the same way that it exists today existed when I was younger, because I feel like whatever identities that I had placed on myself then, if I could have walked in and been like, I don't have to place identities on myself, I can just go learn what it is to be me first, so that I can then understand like the identities that I want to put on myself. The ones not that I had to, because it was the only place I fit in, but the ones that like, this is who I am. Like, this is actually where I feel like I've been built to be, and like where I thrive, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Who does that? Like, who gets a chance to like not be something before they have to like learn what it is that they decided that they're going to be, but like gets to be nothing, or be that piece gets to be thrown to the side for a second while I get to figure it out, and then I can claim identity instead.
Exactly.
Like, not very many places that I've ever been to. So
same. Like, I wish I grew up in this area and I knew about this place. I never came here as a kid. I wish I did. Because seeing what it's done for the kids that come here has been incredible.
Totally.
I should say what God has done through this place for the kids, not this place. But yeah.
I'd love it. Yeah. I totally know what you mean in every way, because it is. I mean, like, sometimes I feel like, especially when God calls us into ministry and being able to do things with with people, it's so easy to sometimes forget that, like, actually, we're just super grateful that we get to even have this opportunity to be able to be part of it, because we can see what it would have been as an impact for us, while we get to see how it's being an impact on people today.
Exactly.
And it's just so beautiful, like such a cool thing that he lets us even be part of this great work that he has. Meaning like, it may not be about the fruit that grows on my tree. It may be that, like, he's called me, and I feel like this has been like a big calling for this particular season of my life, has been like, how can I allow other people to, like, let me rephrase, how can we grow fruit on or how can we watch and produce fruit on other people's trees, and how it's not as important to always be seeking after what's the next thing for me, what's the biggest thing, because, like, I don't know, it's almost like as I get older, I start to realize, like, wow, I've accomplished a lot of really great things, but what does it look like for me to be able to, like, impart either some of that knowledge, or what if I just imparted all of what he's given me to be like, how can I assist you to accomplishing some of the things that you feel like you would like to see in your life, and the things that you feel like you're called to be part of, and, like, how can I jump into that without needing the credit, without needing the, like, notoriety, without all the extra pieces that, like, always seem to fit with, like, well, look at this job I did, I'm so good, you know what I mean? Like, but to be like, no, actually, I just want to see it grow, because I know deep down in my heart, because he's shown me, I know that work will ultimately spur the next person on to be like, dang, it was really cool to see that. I want other people to experience that thing too, right?
For sure. And that ties in really well with, like, the next question. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you found YFC and why you got involved here? And
Sure.
like, what is your position, and what are you hoping to do through that position, if that makes sense?
Totally. This has been such a long journey for me. So for anybody that doesn't know necessarily, I'm 34. I've worked in youth ministry before. I've worked in, oh my gosh, if I were to call out all the different jobs that I've done, I feel like such a millennial. It's insane in the way that, like, I've been like, oh, well, I've done all of these different things. But, like, it's honestly given me such a well-rounded picture of, like, what it is to be in service jobs, what it is to do the career job, what it is to get into, honestly, to be able to chase and passionately after a dream that you have, and all those things, and being able to see what all of those things look like. And it's hard to like pinpoint one thing as like a catalyst changing thing. I would actually take all of those things and be like, so why am I here today? All of those things have, like, led to this moment today. Like, if I had to take, like, pillars of big things that have happened in my life, I've gotten to run a worship program at a successful church. I've gotten to play video games as a career, as a Twitch streamer with my wife for like 3.5 years, and that was amazing. And I've gotten just so many different. I got to play in a metal band that was, like, to the point of signature multiple different times, like, different things. So getting to do several different pieces, to now watch, like, all of this come together, even marketing, actually throwing that out there too. I even got to do, like, marketing before this, and I would say, like, all of those pieces are starting to help me to, like, understand, like, how can I be not just helpful to other people, how can I be helpful to the organization that I'm in? Why do I still get to play video games and be part of that here at YFC, when I still also get to do all of the music that I get to enjoy at my church, at like Res Greeley, at you know, like, all these different places? Like, why God would you allow me this when everybody else has to have this, like, standard cookie cutter thing? And I think the interest, like, the thing that just keeps coming back to me is, like, Gabe, because I've given you the ability to be faithful and to jump into something, and I've given you the ability to try all of these things, and every one of them I had purpose for. Like, the thing that keeps standing out to me lately has been that concept of, like, beauty from ashes. That idea of just, like, the things that could have looked like, oh, you were so close, but then this, or it was, like, right there, and then it fell through, and it wasn't what it needed to be like, even in those, which I would say none of the things that I've even mentioned were even, like, the ashes parts, but all the ashes that had to happen to even get to the points of feeling accomplishment and all of those things, to then say, like, I'm going to take the ashes of that, and I'm going to take the good of that, and all of those things were part of this, like, plan that I've had for you to be able to move your heart from where it was. Because think about, like, the amount, like, when you're so invested into something, your heart is tied to it. I feel like the biggest thing for any like, kid at this point would be, like, probably a relationship with, like, girlfriend, boyfriend, 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 girlfriend, girlfriend. It doesn't matter. Like those types of like those intimate relationships, the closest ones that you may have are the ones that like, it's ripping when those either die or move on or there's something else. Like it's one of the most like crushing things that can happen in your life. And I feel like even in those, I feel like it was in the moment, I can't speak to it being like, man, that was so great, because it wasn't. It was terrible. It felt so bad. But to be able to be on the backside of it now and to see like, okay, you needed to take me from this to this. Otherwise, my heart doesn't exist here. My heart doesn't care here like it needed to care here, if that makes sense. And like, and it wouldn't have given me the opportunity to make the relationships that like I have with you or any of the other faculty that are here at YFC, right? Like, I just think that's the most beautiful thing of who he is like, this wasn't the intention for me to ruin all of your relationships. My intention was to get you to the place of relationship that was going to be most impactful for the kingdom now.
Right.
And like, dang, like that, like that's a tough thing it's a tough pill to swallow until you start to realize like, dang, this has been so good. And it's been like one of the most healing things for my own heart too, to be able to jump in and just care for people again. I love ministry work. It's one of my favorite things ever. And I didn't know if I was going to ever get a chance to do it again. And so to be offered another season where I also get to take all the things I wasn't doing in ministry and to bring that into it as well too is like, who else but Jesus? You know what I mean? Like no one's putting a story together like that but him. So, yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, that was really long, but you get the idea.
That's okay. He totally does that. Like, he totally takes our lives and things happen for a reason, but it all does kind of build up into the current moment, like, so that you can be where you are today.
Right.
Like, and you see that in your personal life, you see that in my life, you see that multiple times in the Bible, like,
oh, 100%.
It's crazy how he does that.
I mean,
it's so cool.
Look at David.
Yeah.
I mean, like, of all the people, that's the first one that comes to mind is like just David in the Bible is just like, my goodness, didn't just start as like shepherd boy, but like as like one, like the youngest, gets completely looked over, doesn't get brought in. Like prophets out here like, yo, where's the son that actually is supposed to be doing this? And he just got completely looked over, is out doing. I mean, I can only imagine like there's probably a level of complacency he's living in because he's like, well, this is the job that I have. This is what I do. I kind of just come out and just deal with this. I mean, like, that's me, of course, injecting myself into David. I don't know his exact feelings on it, but like that would be pretty boring every day. You're always out just like completely on your own, not getting a chance to do things with other people. And then to get looked over on a thing that was like, well, that would have been a pretty cool promotion.
Yeah.
Bummer. To then all the different pieces that went along with that, to him coming in and like being able to play music for the current king and being almost killed by the current king in the process of it, and just like this constant back and forth battle between like a guy who was jealous of him and him not even having any idea what he was stepping into at all, like him living in a completely different reality. It's just it's just so good to then eventually become the king, where you would think that was the end of his story, like I'm the king now.
Right.
But then in that, like the amount of learning that he had in that, like, because then you think about the Bathsheba like like thing where it's like he was still learning all the way through and just continually came back to God in all of the things that he had. And it was like that was why he was highly favored, and that was why he was able to constantly like see, I guess what's the word? He was able to see redemption in all of these pieces, you know, because of just like, well, I screwed up. And he was like willing to admit it, and he'd come back and like, or, well, this guy wants to kill me. What do you want me to do? I could slit his throat in this cave right now, or instead I can not slit his throat and just allow him to live. Like speaking to when was that was Saul, right?
I think it was Saul, yeah.
Yeah, King Saul being in the cave. I mean, like the amount of opportunity and the ones that he just like made some wise decisions and some poor ones, but always going back to the Lord with them. It's just like, dude, and look what his story was.
For real.
Shepherd boy to like known as one of the greatest kings to then birth the wisest king.
Yeah.
Literally only becomes the wisest king due to all of the amount of like favor that had been from David prior, where it's like, my goodness, like, what a dude. Like,
and even with his mistakes, even with sleeping with Bathsheba and then killing her husband, who was one of his best soldiers. Like
tons of things. I mean, drunkenness in the streets, like man is just like out there, and Jesus is still completely for somebody with a repentant heart at the end of the day, who legitimately their heart was repentant and still wanted to do things for him at the end of the day, which was just like, dang, dude, what a good God.
For real. And yeah, it's so cool because like it doesn't matter what you've done, where you've been,
or
like,
where you started.
or where you started.
Where you started
Yeah.
just doesn't matter. Like, that's just it. Like,
Yeah.
once we're all adults, I feel like that especially with like the kids that we get to work with all the time, it's just like, bro, not all of us started in the same place. Some of us started with a silver spoon in our mouths, and some of us started with literally like digging a plastic straw out of the trash can.
Yeah.
And the reality is that both of those people are completely loved exactly the same by the God of the universe, and that they both have just as much potential to be able to see amazing things happen, because guess what? There's nothing past what God has for you in your life that will ever interject or stop your ability to hit a certain point. Like, the reality is that like he already has a plan and he had it in advance for you. Like,
Exactly. And even no matter where you've come from, like, or what your past looks like your story is still important. You're still valuable. You're still loved in the eyes of God, which is just kind of mind-boggling sometimes, because
and important.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that we're that important too, I think is just like, so you're telling me you love him and her and him like as much as you love me. How could that doesn't compute on a human level? That doesn't really make sense in my mind.
Exactly.
Until I start to watch the way that he does it and the way that he starts to connect like different people from different areas doing different things, and I'm like, no, he cared about that story as much as he cared about that story, as much as he's continuing to work them out, while at the same time like working out his plan in this world. Like, if you feel like you can put God in a box, like, bruh, like, think about all the things that are happening around you and the way that they connect, and it's like there's almost no way to put that in a box. It's just too good.
Like, I think it's almost supposed to not even make sense.
It almost can't. Like, that's why it's so good. Like,
exactly. Wow. Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question. Like, why did you decide to follow Jesus, and like, how has that changed you throughout your life?
Yeah, man, I feel like I had been like pitched Jesus. I'm the kid that grew up with like, went to Sunday school, did all the things, like had to go to church until about high school, and then my parents were like, well, if this is ever going to become, and I give a lot of credit to my parents in this, because not that I found Christ through my parents, but I give credit to my parents for this parenting move, because what they did was they said, like, at this point, it's either going to be his relationship or it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
And so they kind of said, like, well, we're leaving it up to you. Like, if you want to be able to come to church with us, you absolutely can. But at this point, it's kind of up to you as to whether or not you're going to get to actually go. And I say it was smart. At the time, it must have felt so dumb to them, because guess what I did first thing? Stopped going to church, like almost immediately. I was like, sick, we out then.
Yeah.
Like, that was just like that was where my thought process went. And it was the beginning of this like journey of just like walking without Jesus, like just walking and not seeing any of it. And it was just like, it's crazy, because I'm a pretty driven person, and I work hard. I want to make sure that, like, if I've got a goal, I'm going to hit it, and I'm going to constantly seek after it until we get to the end of it. And I feel like if I look at my actual life, I'm like, I am a prime example of what I'm saying. I've seen a lot of things that I've gotten to go like, wow, that was so cool. But the funny thing is like, in a lot of those, and I would say every one of those endeavors without Christ, what I realized is they always fell short. And I never quite made it to the point that I wanted to make it, because I just didn't have the know-how or anything to back it. And I definitely didn't have a relationship to be like, I don't know what to do. It was either I figured it out or nothing. Yeah. And so I mean, I did that for a while, and I would say, like, on a human level, it would have looked so good on the outside. But like for me personally, it just felt so empty. I didn't feel like I actually hit anything. By the time my metal band was being looked at by record labels, I was like, we did it. See, look what I did. And it was like, I'm not kidding you, it was less than a month before the whole thing got just shut down. Like my drummer like struggled a lot with alcoholism towards the end. A lot of us were just getting really kind of burnt out, because we've been like working really hard, and like it was crazy, because it was almost as if the goal was to have a record label look at us and then we stopped, as opposed to taking it the next step, because which is where you want to go. And it's like it couldn't. And I feel like that in and of itself like drew me to be like, all right, God, well, what do you want me to do? Like, you've given me this voice, you've given me this ability to get things done. Like, what do you want me to do? We were so close, and we basically had made it like all the way to the edge, but it was like, it ended up just ending like abruptly. And I remember thinking, I don't understand. I've put off most of my college work. It wasn't because I wanted, not because I was lazy, not because I wasn't passing my classes. I just was going really slowly through college because I just didn't care that much about it. I thought, listen, if we can get this metal band thing to kick off, and it was basically at that point, like, then what do I need college for? There's really no need. We'll make all of our money doing this. It'll be fine. And to watch that crash and then to recognize all the other pieces that just didn't come together at the time because I hadn't been working on school or any kind of extra planning or anything outside of it. We got to a point where we just kind of like hit a low. And so I just remember thinking like, okay, something's off, something's wrong. I don't know exactly what it is. But at the time, my wife now was like my long-term girlfriend. I had been like very like wishy-washy on like what directions we were gonna go, and I just remember feeling like it was us going back to church like for the first time in a while that finally reminded me like this was never like this journey was never meant to be done without Christ, and it was like, okay, well, I'm going to believe that. At this point, I don't have a lot of faith because I haven't been faithful, nor have I like really stepped into this. So this is the beginning of my personal faith journey to be like, okay, well, I believe that you're saying you're going to do something with this band thing that's now not a thing anymore. And like, there's something here with this girl and I don't really know what it is either. But okay, like let's jump into that. Let's see what that looks like. And so I got to start exploring what it looked like. What is marriage? Why did marriage matter? How was that going to affect my relationship like with this girlfriend that I'd already had for like 6 years at this point? Like what could possibly be different after 6 years? And realizing like, oh, marriage is actually like very intentionally a biblical thing. And that was what and you wouldn't know it until you start reading into it. And that's a whole different thing for another day, but like it's just crazy. Like, so I started diving into that and started jumping into going to church. And then my wife now, we got married, and then we started to kind of go like, okay, well, both of us like found each other in musical ways back in the day. So like, how can we do this better? And I think the big turning point for me, especially like musically and finding God in particular, was just this moment where I realized after the biggest show that I had ever gotten to play with a band that I had learned how to scream, how to do metal from, and we got to play with them, and that was like surreal in and of itself. But I remember that show so vividly because when it started, it was so easy for me to just go out and say who's ready tonight, like let's get it kind of thing, and like watch the entire Aggie in Fort Collins, like every person double fisting, horns in the air for metal. And I was like, man, God's given me this ability to be able to like spark and ignite passion in people. Yeah. And it wasn't just to get them to worship me on a stage, but like how can I then be a better reflection of who he is, so that it basically just reflects back to the one who actually gave me the ability and skill in the first place. And like it, like all of these things kind of like all culminated back into like, holy crap, I don't just need the Lord, but the Lord is actually fully directing me, and he's been doing it even when I fully rejected him the whole time, like in college and everything else too. You know what I mean? So wow. Yeah. So I guess that was when it came back. So I mean, I was 25. I sometimes think, dang, what if I had started this back when I was 19 or when I was like, I don't know, 16? Like, what if I had just like, that would have been like an extra 10 years of watching God build my faith. What are the things I could be doing now at 30 if I had been jumping and like faithful to just jump when he called me to jump when I was young and it made no sense? Yeah. And how can I now continue to jump when it doesn't make sense and I don't have any idea what I'm going to do? And this is like a wild, crazy adventure. How do I do that better? And so I sometimes wish that I could have it, but it's like, I can't regret it. This was his plan for me, and he knew that this was going to happen the way that it did. Yeah. And so I just want to like encourage everybody who is young in this and be like, guys, you don't even know, just start jumping. Like get in the pool. Like I think Apple said this the other day, like get in the pool because you can't swim. You can't learn to swim without being in water first. Like you just have to just do it. And so. Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. Isn't it crazy how even when we're rejecting God and running from God, like he can still use that. Oh, and he does. He like uses 100%. Every single thing. He does. That's what's crazy. It's wild. Yeah. Yeah. To bring that full circle, like
how do you like escape from the world and find shelter in God, if that makes sense? Like how do you seek God personally?
I think the thing that pops out, just to like recap back to like worship, I think that's been one of the things that's like most surreal to me, is like where I get to take a gift that he's given me and I get to lead the people that he would bring in to be part of that experience with me, but at the same time fully recognize and give me this place of like, but you're still my child. And like I still want to hear you worship, not just lead somebody else into worship. And so it's like this like kind of special time for me to be able to be like, I get to use the thing that you gave me, and not everybody has this, but I get to take this, like when we think about like the talents that he's given, like different, like that he'd given different people and like using them to the best of their ability. I really hope to be the one at the end where even if it was just 2 talents, just 1 talent more than the group that I'm leading, I have no idea, you know what I mean? Like even if it was just 2 talents, to be able to have invested those properly to then hear from my Father in heaven someday, like, well done, good and faithful servant, like for stepping into it and doing it. But I just love that even in the investment, I think for me, the reason it feels so much also like an escape is that he also just allows me to just be in a place of worship with him in those moments too. And it's almost like even in the calling out of exhortation or anything else from other people, like, and just like having other people declare who he is and like what he's doing and all these things, that is ultimately bringing freedom in their lives too, that like even in those, I'm worshiping the Father at the same time. It's just a surreal like situation for me. I realize not everybody is going to have that same experience, but that's for me. That's my go-to place, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I think that's about all we've got for today.
Cool.
Thank you, Gabe, so much for being on the podcast.
Dude, thanks for having me. Appreciate
sharing your story. We really appreciate you and all you do here for the kids and just for our organization. It's been a huge blessing to have you on our team. So
appreciate it. Glad to be here in every way.
Yeah,
so
we
good.
love having you. Thank you for being on the show today, and for just serving the way that you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, guys, so that's all we've got for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you again next week. Have a good one.